Hey everybody, Man in Orbit here. I am a new EQ2 player as of about 1 year ago with the launch of EQ2 Origins. I had a group of friends, came back, and we all decided to give it a shot. We're having an absolute blast a year later. We're looking forward to the new expansion in 2 months. I know there's going to be a lot of excitement and hopefully a lot of new players coming to the game to check out Echoes of Fadewar in December. I wanted to start with my first video guide being a overview of each class so that you can pick your class appropriately based off the current state of the game. Uh, there's 4 archetypes to pick from: fighter, priest, mage, and scout. So while there are 4 archetypes, there's also 4 play style. The play styles are tank, healer, DPS, the Holy Trinity, and a 4th utility. All 4 are extremely important in group play, which Origins is heavily focused on. A lot of people will come to the game and ask, what can I solo best with? We'll get into that. But this game is not focused on soloing. This game is very heavily geared towards group play and class fantasy, where you play your class. And if you play your class well and do your job well, the group will be successful. So we'll get straight into what the 4 archetypes are, what classes you can pick from. So a lot of times they correlate to good and evil. Some can be both. For instance, Guardian and Berserker. These are your tanks. These are your warriors. Berserker is a little more DPS focused, whereas Guardian a little more tank focused and take a little bit heavier of a hit load before he goes down. Both good and evil can be Guardians and Berserkers. I personally play a Berserker, find it extremely fun, can tank most of the content in the game. Probably the only place where a Guardian outshines me is in high-end raids, very hard fights. Other than that, I do more damage than a Guardian while tanking 90% as well. Monk Bruiser. Monk Bruiser are very underutilized in this game, and I think sort of deservedly so. The reason I say that is that monks and bruisers, while they can tank, can't tank very effectively. They tank using avoidance and they wear leather, so they can't take heavy hits. They're pretty hard to keep up, especially if you're a plate healer. So they're not usually invited to groups unless they're going to fill the role of DPS, which they can do, and a geared out monk or a geared out bruiser can be very effective DPS. I will tell you that in endgame raiding, there are very limited, if any, slots for a monk bruiser, usually 1 per raid of either class, because they can pull feign death and position mobs for the tank. Paladin, Shadow Knight. These are favorites of most people who play class fantasy or MMORPG games. I can understand why. Paladin obviously can only be good. Shadow Knight can obviously only be evil. That being said, I personally am not a huge fan of the Paladin or the Shadow Knight. They can't tank as well as a Berserker. They can't DPS as well as a Berserker. So to me, they don't really have a very large purpose in the game yet. I know I've been told this changes in later expansions. It might very well change in EOF. I could be off as of 2 months from now. But right now in the game, high-end raid guilds don't utilize very much Paladin or Shadow Knight in their raid comp. It can be done. It is difficult and is very gear dependent. One of the problems I have with these is they don't have defensive cooldowns. So Paladin can ward itself and heal itself, but must be able to cast those spells while getting hit, which is very difficult to do sometimes. And a Shadow Knight has, just like a Paladin, has no defensive cooldowns, whereas a Guardian or a Berserker has buttons they can hit to make their mitigation shoot up through the roof for 30 seconds. So these guys are very dependent on not pulling too many mobs. If you pull too many, you're probably going to wipe because there's not a lot of oh shit buttons you can press and get yourself through a tough situation. That is my personal opinion on these two. I know they're extremely popular classes, Shadow Knight especially, because it does cast damaging spells. So it does have a 30-meter range on some of its spells, which is a very nice quality of life to have as well. I just don't think they're up to snuff as far as Kingdom of Sky expansion, in my opinion. If that's your class, if that's the class fantasy you want to portray, if that's what you enjoy, go for it. They're completely viable in group content. It's just raid content. They fall kind of short. Priests. There's 6 priests here. Templar, Inquisitor, Warden, Fury, and Mystic Defiler. I think the Druids can be either good or evil. Templar is going to be good. Inquisitor's evil. Mystic's good. Defiler's evil. There's essentially 3 types of priests. You have your plate healers, the Inquisitor Templars, your leather healers, the Druid Fury, and the chain healers or the Shaman, the Mystic Defiler. They all play a different role. So Templars is going to be your most healing throughput with the least amount of DPS. Inquisitors, a little bit tankier, can get in there, can actually do decent melee DPS when they're not healing, and can put out some pretty strong heals. I think both these classes are very essential to raids. Probably 1 Inquisitor per raid and probably 1 to 2 Templars per raid. I'm still working on raid comps, so I'm not the most knowledgeable on those, but they're both very viable healers. The cast times are very slow on the plate healers, so you have to be very proactive in casting on who needs it, and if somebody takes hits unexpectedly, it is harder for you to react. The Druid, on the other hand, is the opposite. Very quick cast times, but you do not have reactive heals that proc when you are hit like a plate healer does, so you are a very reactive healer. You can be proactive because you do have heals over time, which means if you anticipate damage coming to a target, you can put on your HOTS, make sure that whenever they do get hit, they get healed up immediately. You are wasting some of your mana in doing so, because if they never get hit, the spell was still cast, the mana was still burned. But they are the most quick to react to different situations. I've heard that in EOF, the next expansion, Echoes of Fadewar, we're going to see Wardens and Furies be able to put out some pretty decent amounts of damage. As of right now, they don't do a lot of damage. They are very reactive, very good for group content. In raids, from what I've heard, high-end raiding guilds don't utilize them as often, but they are very fun classes to play, so I would still kind of suggest them. Mystic Defiler, they're kind of in the middle. They use wards as their primary healing. Wards are a magical shield that gets used up before the person will take any damage. They are very mana efficient in that regard, because every bit of your shield will get used up before they take damage. 100% of your heal will be utilized. Whereas a reactive, where you get hit for less than it procs for, might waste a little bit of a heal and overheal, and heals over time very much so. You're going to be overhealing all the time. So the wards are very mana efficient. They have medium cast times, lots of utility. Honestly, I think the healing in this game is one of the best MMORPGs I've seen in the diversity of the healing. If you ever want 2 healers in a group, what you'll see if they have a Warden, for instance, or a Fury, they're going to say non-leather heals and look for either a chain or a plate healer to complement them, because having 2 different types of heals going off complements each other extremely well. There's a variety of healers needed in a raid, so they're all viable for endgame as of right now. I would definitely say essential to a raid is a main tank has a Templar in its group, and every raid needs probably 1 Mystic and 1 Defiler. Inquisitor is very nice because it has a resurrection that gives no res sickness, so if the tank goes down, you can get them back up and back into the fight very quickly. And then the Wardens are very good for group healing outside of the main tank and the off-tank groups. So there's viability all across the board in the healer spectrum. Mages. This is where it gets interesting. So we have Wizard Warlock, again, good and evil. And Warlock, think AoE damage. Area of effect all the time, all day long. They burn mobs in an area of effect. Wizard, much more single target. They do have some area of effects. They're not useless in an AoE fight, but they are able to burn single target mobs or smaller groups of mobs much more effectively. At endgame, I will say be careful. I play a tank. If you cast too much damage too fast, you will get aggro, you will get one shot. So wizards and warlocks die a lot. Death penalties in this game aren't very severe, so it's not a huge issue. But you have to be very careful how you play if you don't want your healer being taken out of the fight to get you back up. Illusionist Coercer. Now, here's our first talk about utility. Both are utility. Illusionist is good, Coercer is evil. And these guys are awesome. Awesome. Very easy to play class. I would say it's a very noob-friendly class to raiding. It's not a solo class for the most part. Illy gets a pet that helps it solo, and a coercer can coerce pets or take mobs as pets. They do break occasionally, so it does get messy sometimes. They also give a ton of buffs to the group, and they are the main source of mana regen. And they give, like, a group without an Illy or a coercer, you feel it. You will feel it. It is very nice to have one of these in your group at all times. I think almost every group at endgame, even group content, much less raid content, is required. I would also say, as far as raid content goes, if you want to raid, many of the main tank slots and the healer slots are filled right now. They might be onesie twosies looking for those things. They will always be looking for more utility. Illy and Coercer are very important for that. Illy's slightly more important, I would say, but Illy and Coercer, you will find a raid guild looking for you. Absolutely. Conjurer and Necromancer. These two are the cheater classes of the game, in my opinion. I think they are completely overtuned. So they are tier 1 DPS out the gate, just straight up. They have a pet that does about half their DPS for them. So it's a little too tuned up, in my opinion. I think it does a little too much DPS. They also have a version of the pet that is a tank pet. The tank pet is a little too tuned up, in my opinion. These are the two classes that can solo. And if you're just starting the game and you don't have any friends, playing these classes will be easy. You will down content, you will take on solo mobs, you will complete quests, and you can do it all by yourself. That being said, the point of the game is to be in a group. So I don't, like, while I would suggest playing around on a Conjurer or a Necro for the fun of it, because it is extremely fun, at endgame, there's too many Necros and too many Conjurers. All your gear and all your spells are going to be very expensive. So I wouldn't recommend this being the class that you level to 70 first. Maybe for fun as a secondary class, but you're not going to find a raid guild. You're going to run out of content that you can solo eventually. So that's my suggestion there. And then the Scout. And these classes are extremely well designed. I really like them. All. They're all, well, all but one, and I'll talk about that. So Swashbuckler and Brigand. Again, think Swashbuckler is good, and they are AoE heavy. They get an ability called Hurricane in the 50s that makes their auto attacks do area of effect, and they can down mobs. Super fun class. I have a Swashbuckler alt. Love it. It is fantastic. Does really good tier 1 DPS. If you want to be top of the parse, Brigand. Brigand is more single target or small encounter target damage, but they do a ton of it. An absolute truckload of damage. Can be a very fun class. Both are very well designed. I like the fact that they play off of each other and they fill different roles in a raid while simultaneously being tier 1 DPS. I'm going to skip down to the Assassin Ranger next. The assassin has, I would recommend for more advanced players or players who like a challenge. They can be very good DPS or extremely hard hitting DPS in the right hands. In the wrong hands, not so much. So I'd say the floor is a little higher. You need to have a little more skill to play this one well. But if you do play it well, people will notice. It is awesome. Lots of buttons, lots of backstabs, lots of fun to be had on an assassin. Not a solo class. None of the scouts can really solo. Maybe a brigand because it can take some hits. But a swashbuckler can't take as many hits as a brigand, but an assassin can't take very many hits, and it can't do damage effectively if it's not behind a mob. Ranger is interesting. It's a unique class in this game. It can stand in the back with the casters on a raid and avoid a lot of the damage and put up some really good numbers. I have a really good ranger in my guild. He puts up some very good numbers. That being said, he goes through about a platinum worth of arrows a day at endgame in about a 3-hour raid. So it's a very expensive class to play. So I would highly not recommend Ranger for a new player. Just the dex tax is too much because you're going to be using poisons, you're going to be using arrows, you're burning through 1 to 2 platinum an evening, and unless you're buying platinum from bots, you're not going to be able to afford to play this. I hope they fix this in the next expansion. I don't know what to expect. I've never played EOF before. Dirge and Troob. These are awesome. Troob buffs casters to some oversimplify. Casters benefit greatly from having a Troob in their group, and melee DPS or scouts benefit greatly from having a Dirge in their group. Again, utility classes, mandatory in raid. If you're not going to play a chanter and you want to get into a raid team, play one of these. You'll probably get an invite. Very important, very fun classes. They don't do a lot of damage, so soloing is kind of very difficult for them, but they do have some huge quality of life things like 40-something% run speed buffs. And no matter what group they're in, they can run different utility buffs to adjust to the encounter that you're facing. So very fun, very well designed. Overall, I give EverQuest 2 an excellent rating in its class design. Monk Bruiser is probably the only two that take it or leave it. I've seen a monk in a very good hands. It can do a lot. I haven't seen a bruiser at a high level. There's just not very many of them. If you do want some cheap gear, play a monk or a bruiser. You'll find it all really cheap on the market. Priests, again, in the right hands, any of these priests can be extremely powerful healers. In the wrong hands, any of these priests can be terrible healers. So learn your class, learn how to play it. Mages, I would recommend sticking to the top 4 if you're looking to raid. The bottom 2 if you're looking to screw around, have some fun, and do a lot of things solo. I think the bottom 2 are extremely overpowered, almost to the point where I don't enjoy them. I made a necro, got to level 12 in like 7 minutes, never needed to think about having a group because my pet is just way too powerful. And it kind of takes the fun out of the game, in my opinion, but a lot of people really, really like that. That's why they're so popular. And a scout, highly recommend a swashbuckler brigand. Any of the utility are just fantastically designed. A lot of MMORPGs don't focus on utility like EverQuest 2 does, and I think that's a shame because I think the class fantasy and having a utility class that can absolutely change the outcome of fights or many fights or change the amount of downtime between fights is just an awesome way to play the game. So that's my overview of the classes. New players, pick what you enjoy. That's what I'll say. New players, pick what you enjoy. Class fantasy. Like I said, I'm a berserker and a swashy. I really like the AoE auto attacks. I like being lots of damage. I like being a little bit tanky on the one. I like being a glass cannon on the other. It's a nice juxtaposition for me to get some variety in the way that I play. And it's weird that in EverQuest 2, I enjoy the melee as much as I do because I really played casters almost exclusively the last 20 years that I've played an MMO. Even in the first EverQuest, I played an enchanter. And WoW, I was a mage. I didn't get into any of the melee classes in either of those games, or BDO, I was a caster. I've never really gotten into the melee, and in this game, it is so much fun. But a lot of people really enjoy the mages. They like sitting in the back. They like shooting their spells. There's a lot less mechanics to dodge. But it'll be extremely competitive to try to get gear. So that's my hopefully 5-minute, 10-minute overview of the classes. Well, I guess we're at 20 minutes now. I'm going to post this up. Hope you guys like it. Hope it's helpful. And if you liked it, hit subscribe. And I'll be making more guide videos for EQ2 because I'm really enjoying the game.